The last SP SW1200 I reviewed was a disappointment. Will this one do any better? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi, and today I'm reviewing an HO scale SW1200 locomotive from Walthers Proto. My model is decorated for Southern Pacific in the scarlet and gray scheme. This model is part of the Walthers Proto line. Walthers offers the SW1200 in two versions, with and without DCC and sound. The MSRP for the DCC ready version is $199.98. The MSRP for the version with ESU Loc Sound DCC and sound is $299.98. I got my DCC ready model for $154.99 from modeltrainstuff.com. If you're wondering why I bought the DCC ready version instead of the DCC equipped version, it's because the number I wanted, 2282, was only available in DCC ready form. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. Each road number is only available one way or the other. I'm not sure why Walthers did it that way instead of offering each number in both sound equipped and DCC ready form. We'll start the model at 100 possible points. The locomotive is packed in a cardboard box with a clear plastic window on top. Inside is a piece of white foam surrounding a clear plastic cradle that holds the model. There's a sheet of paper in the box with exploded view drawings. The handrails have foam protectors. Though it's a little large compared to the size of the engine, this is a good box that should protect the model for storage and transport. My model of SP2282 represents an SW1200 from an order of 17 units delivered to Southern Pacific in 1965. SP ordered the units with MU connections and full light packages. Though they were intended as switchers, they could also be used in road service if needed. These diesels were originally numbered from 1607 to 1623. The switchers did not keep their original numbers for long. In 1965, as part of SP's general locomotive renumbering, the units in this order were renumbered in a series from 2272 to 2288. 2282 was originally 1617. They retained these numbers until most of the units were retired in the late 1980s. 2282 was one of a few units that lasted into the 1990s and wasn't retired until 1996. Since I modeled the early to mid-1990s, this unit fit better into my era than the other numbers that Walthers offers, which is why I wanted this one. According to Joseph Strapak's Southern Pacific Diesel Locomotive Compendium, Volume 2, after retirement from the SP, 2282 went to the Alamo Gulf Coast Railroad and then Martin Marietta Materials. I compared the model to photos of SP2282, and many of the details are generally correct. There's a good photo of the cab end of this locomotive from 1973 on page 89 of Strapak's Southern Pacific Historic Diesels, Volume 16. At that time, the locomotive still had footboards and the older style uncoupling levers as depicted on the model. Other photos I found show that the footboards were gone by 1980. Walthers also got the triangular pieces near the corner steps right, which were incorrect on the Rapido version of this model that I reviewed previously. Walthers did a good job with the SP light packages, number boards, and the mounting location for the air horn with a conduit going down into the cab. There are a few errors. There should be a small door near the sill below the cab window on the left side. The fuel tank on the right side should have a round gauge on it. Harder to fix are the handrail supports on the sides of the hood. Some SW1200s had these, but the SP units didn't since they had handrails on the outside. There are also molded-on marker lights on the end of the hood that were not present on the real locomotive. I don't know that any of these would be deal breakers for most modelers, but they're still incorrect, so I'm taking 5 points for all of it together. The paint on the model is thin and opaque and the markings are crisp. The handrails are made of a flexible plastic that should stand up to modest handling. The stanchions are mostly straight up and down on my model when viewed from the side. There's nice louver detail on the sides of the hood. I think it might just be a paint treatment, but the front grille appears to have depth. Both ends of the engine have positionable drop steps. The pilots have uncoupling levers, MU connectors, and hoses. The cab windows have nice gasket detail. I'm not sure why Walthers chose to use molded-on windshield wipers, though. These are out of step with the overall detail level of the model. I think it would have been better to have no windshield wipers at all than to have them as part of the window. I'm taking 5 points. On top of the cab, the model has a whip antenna that seems to be made of wire. That's good for durability, but I'd be careful since it looks sharp enough to poke skin. There's also a detailed horn casting, though the configuration is a little odd looking. In most photos I found of these units, the middle chime is facing backwards and the short chime is on the side facing forward. The bell in the trapezoidal frame appears to be correct for these units as built. However, later in their careers, many got the more common top-mounted SP-style bell without a frame. The number boards aren't lighted. Toward the front, the grille detail is molded on but looks pretty good. Some weathering would help to give it some depth. Detail on the underside is very basic, though the major components are there, including the 930-gallon fuel tank. All of the axles are powered and all the wheels pick up current. The model has Protomax knuckle couplers on both ends. Looking for a match on the horizontal center line, the front coupler is high, so I'm taking 5 points. The rear coupler is low. All the wheels are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge. There is no body wobble. The model weighs 8.4 ounces. Drawbar pull peaked at 2.2 ounces on my force gauge, not bad for a small switcher. I'm running the locomotive on DC. The mechanism is smooth and quiet. A good DCC decoder could probably make it perform even better. The headlights are directional. The front headlight and oscillating light come on when the locomotive is moving forward, and the rear headlight comes on in reverse, but the rear oscillating light doesn't turn on. It's really hard to show on video, which tends to make model train lights look bright regardless, but the headlights are dim compared to some other models. The locomotive has no trouble on Kato 550mm curves, which equate to about a 21 5/8" radius. To remove the couplers, I'll unscrew the draft gearboxes. The fit is tight and it takes a little coaxing to get all the parts out. This model is built a little differently from the way Proto 2000 SW1200s used to be. The frame is die cast and the body is plastic. To remove the body, first very carefully pry the front and rear handrails loose from the cab sides. There are a series of tabs that hold the body to the frame, 2 on each side, and 1 in the back. Use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to push these tabs inward toward the middle of the locomotive. The front of the body has started to come up. After very carefully rocking and pulling on the shell, it finally came off. Be careful because there are a lot of tiny wires inside that could be easily broken. The main circuit board is mounted above the motor. Judging from the number of wires running to the front and rear light stalks, I would suspect that there are more LED lights installed than are available running on DC. Adding a DCC decoder would be the easiest way to get these working. There's a dummy plug on the circuit board that has a Next 18 style connector, so you would need to use a DCC decoder with a compatible connector that's similar in size to the dummy plug. While I have the couplers off, I'll swap out the originals for KD158s. The whiskers on these couplers tend to catch on the inside edges of the draft gearboxes. I filed the sides slightly and that cured the problem. I always like to make sure the new couplers swing freely before putting them on the model. Both new couplers ended up slightly high, so I used shims made from some scrap styrene between the frame and draft gearbox to lower the couplers. So if you've been watching the channel for a while, you might remember that I reviewed the Rapido version of this model some time ago. I had some issues with that one as well, mainly that the triangular pieces near the corner steps were the wrong shape, and that would have been a real difficult thing to fix. So I ended up actually selling off that model on eBay, and then when I found the Walthers model was available, I decided to give it a try. And Walthers did get that part right. There are still some detail issues, as I've already covered in the review. However, I think they're relatively minor and easier to deal with. So in that respect, I think this model's maybe a little better. Even though it may not have quite as much detail on it, I think what's there is better. And you can always add a little bit more with aftermarket parts if you need to. I'll probably update it so that it looks more like it did in the 90s, since that's my era that I'm going after. I am a little disappointed in the headlights. The glow from the headlights is a little bit diffused, if that makes sense. It's really hard to show on video because lights tend to look bright on video regardless. But they're not as bright and point sourced as some other models, or like the models that I build myself where I do my own fiber optic lenses. I really like the brightness that creates, and these are kind of dim in comparison, but we'll see if I do anything about that or not. I am happy to see that each light stock, front and back, had 4 wires. So there's the blue common plus 3 other wires, which leads me to believe that it's probably headlight, oscillating light, and emergency light. So I'm thinking that if you put a DCC decoder in this thing, then the lights would probably be operable. I know only the front oscillating light works on DC, which was a little disappointing, but if the wiring is there, then there's a way to make it work. So hopefully that's true. They didn't just put a bunch of wires in there for the heck of it. But that would seem a little odd. When I get around to doing a DCC install on this, I may also investigate to see if it's possible to light up the number boards in some way. So, but we'll see. That's a problem for another day. Anyway, overall, I think it's a pretty good model. Let's see what we've got. The model had some minor detail errors, so I took 5 points in the prototype accuracy category. The windshield wipers were molded onto the window glazing, so I took 5 points in the paint and detail category. Both couplers were at the wrong height, so I took 10 points in the standards and operation category. That leaves us with 80 out of 100 possible points, which earns a B-. Overall, this is a pretty good model and it deserves a green signal. Overall, I think Walthers did a pretty good job with this model. If you don't mind having a few detail issues to deal with, then I think you might like it. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.